Welcome back to the arena. This is Hudson Brock, and today we have Jonathan Rapp in the arena with us.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
I normally call Jonathan J Rapp, but your name's evolved a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it has a lot of euphemisms that get associated with it, but, J-Rap, Rap, Jonathan,
Today we
There's a
walked
few
in,
of
I
them.
was introducing him to Kyle, who helps us produce the podcast, and he was on a call, and he said, sorry, I'm just wrapping this call. Just another
Yeah, it just happens.
amazing part of the
Yeah.
name. So we go way back. We met, I think, my freshman year of high school. Is that right?
I think so.
On the Patriots soccer team.
Homeschool soccer team.
Legendary homeschool soccer team. Shout out to all the Patriots that are out there probably not listening to this.
No.
And then we've been friends now for 15, 16 years,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. We're getting old.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of fun career overlap in our stories that'll be fun to get into. The main reason that I wanted to have J-Rap on this podcast is as we were kind of setting up the intro and I was thinking through who to have on, I thought it'd be really fun to have my dad, who's been a big part of the inspiration behind recruiting for me and AlloHire.
The original recruiter.
Yeah.
Recruit.
And then to have J-Rap on because he was actually the first candidate that I ever got to work with and help place at a company back in 2017. And that, to me, was a huge part of discovering how fun recruiting is, discovering how meaningful it can be. And then the next episode will actually have the first recruiter that I ever hired internally. So
That?
Jackson McClure.
It was Jackson.
The real recruiter.
Awesome.
Yep, and that'll be a fun podcast too. But yeah, so J-Rap, I would love for you to just open-ended walk us through some of your story. I'm sure you could talk for a long time about it, but maybe a couple minutes.
Yeah. We'll try to make it fast. So I stumbled into logistics right out of college, like a lot of people in Chattanooga. Shout out to the 15 Inc. 5000. But into Access America, which was kind of like one of the forefathers for the companies that have since sprung up. Cradle to grave, brokerage, just dialing for dollars, original sales job. From there, Access got acquired by Coyote, so stayed in sales, moved into operations management with Coyote when they launched their Southeast branch operations team. And then very quickly after the acquisition by UPS, a lot of people that were working at Coyote knew that like our trajectories were up. So we started dissipating, went to try to start a company that spiraled not great after about 10 months. Went and traveled for a little while with my wife, which is when you and I started talking about what was going to be next. We connected over, I think, trying to get a operations level job with a company called Airspace. So we did that. You got me the original interview and screenings, and then I got passed on for that job. And then a month later, recruited back in for a sales role and took that. Airspace is a logistics tech company focused on time critical logistics. So basically we're the ambulance for logistics. It's incredibly,
I like that tagline.
Yeah, ambulance for logistics. You don't want to pay for them, but you want them to exist, and then you want them to go away as soon as you're done using them. So it's a very complex relationship with a lot of our customers. So really innovative technology built behind the service. Got on really early, I think technically like employee 9 or 10, and now it's 400. Came on as an individual contributor, and then company took off, and I was benefiting from the rocket ship and ended up leading the sales org for a little over a year, and then most recently joined ZEBOX as an entrepreneur in residence. And ZEBOX is basically it's a corporate accelerator, but essentially what we do is recruit companies, not people. So we work with large organizations on their supply chain issues, and then connect them with startups specifically developing products to solve those issues. So I love to sell a good product and solve a problem. So it's kind of a dream job.
That's awesome. And one thing that just came to mind as you were talking is the ability to concisely state what the product or service is. I think you did that for each of those companies. Shows you've been in sales, you get sales process. We were actually talking about that before we pressed record. I think you're one of the best people out there at creating sales process. To slow down a little bit and double click is
There
a
we
term
go.
I learned from you.
Yeah.
Double click in on a moment in your career. So you had this startup that you were involved in Chattanooga. You'd been really in the Chattanooga logistics scene to start your career. Did really well. I remember at one point I think you were averaging like the most calls per day.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I led Access for half a year with dials, so that was all I could do. You know, I wasn't bringing in a bunch of business, but I could
Yep.
make outbound phone calls.
Lots
This
of
is
reps.
before auto dialers and like all the cool things that save you time that exist now. So it was
Just
actually
manually
like
dialing.
manually dialing. So I guess that would be, yeah, several hundred digits dialed a
Headset.
day.
Whole
Headset,
thing.
whole
Yeah.
thing. Bluetooth in the bathroom. That was the joke. I like never took it off. It was with me everywhere.
Bluetooth in the bathroom. That's going to
Yeah.
be a book one day.
Hopefully not.
So I would read it. So so you finished up at Coyote. You go to this startup. It folds, and then I remember you and your wife wanted to take some time just to get perspective. You'd been
Yeah.
calling, just grinding, kind of like building your reputation in the local community, getting those first couple promotions. And then I was like, let's take a breather and like get some perspective. You went through Southeast Asia, is that
Yeah.
right? For like a month?
For two.
2
So it
months.
was like I think Tim Ferriss coined this phrase, maybe someone else, but it's like a mini retirement. So it's when the like most mental free space you have when you're building your career is between jobs. So trying to like stagger those a little bit to take actual breaks between them and call it like a mini retirement. So we did like a Southeast Asia tour. So we did Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand for 2 weeks each, and then finished up in New Zealand for 2 weeks, and then came back. And that's when we started talking to Airspace.
So we met up in LA, I think on your flight back.
Yep.
You stopped in LA for a little bit. That's when we were first chatting about just what's next. I had been thinking, I was in logistics and supply chain as well with Kinco Logistics, and was at a similar point of like, okay, what's next? Would love to do something more entrepreneurial. And I will never forget, you and I were talking about it in my office out in Chino, California, east of LA. And we both had this desire to be what we kind of coined wide-eyed. So like, you know, where you can see the white in your eyes,
Right.
and like that sense of just being alive and having a challenge, having an adventure. And so I think we both realize that career can be a big part of that. It's not the whole part of it.
Right.
Family and there's so much outside of work, but work can be a real catalyst of it. So I think that was really fun to go through that together. We both accepted new jobs, I think like that day or that week.
Yeah. You quit that day.
I think I quit that day,
Yeah.
and then you might have accepted the offer that day to
Right.
move from Chattanooga to Carlsbad,
Right.
San Diego area. And then I was transitioning to work in more like LA proper. So since then, that was 5 years ago, maybe longer. 5.5 years.
That would have been 5.5 years.
I feel like life's like really accelerated. Like
Yeah.
we both been
Kids
very
do that, I
wide-eyed,
think. Yeah.
more kids. But we both made our way from California back to Chattanooga.
Right.
And there's a ton we could talk about there. Before we do that, I'd love just to hear if there's any like people in their 20s, kind of at that stage that we were at, mid-20s, thinking through like, is this it? Should I stay with this company? Keep just going for the next promotion? Like, what are some criteria that you would give to help someone think through whether or not they should make a move? And then beyond that, like you had a pretty meteoric rise from individual contributor that interviewed for an ops role, then got pulled back for a sales job, which is not uncommon.
Yeah.
Like startups need people that get it, that can solve problems. You can interview for one job and get pulled back in for another one. But how do you go from that to a VP by 30 that was leading a pretty substantial revenue team?
Yeah. So I'll start with that kind of path to the leadership role within a startup. So I guess they run together. So if you're in your 20s, anywhere in your 20s, I would say like your development and knowledge, I would value more than your title and compensation. So when I was deciding to move to California with Airspace, it was just the opportunity was so broad with such a young company few employees. So to your point about being pulled into different roles, that also happens once you're in the company. So you can be in sales and then snapped over to run something in product or in operations. So just your path gets a lot broader when you're in a developing organization. And then for me, I knew that I loved logistics, but I also didn't want to be stuck. No offense to those that are working in services in the service only side. I wanted to create a path into the tech side to round out that experience. So the difference between services and tech is a service tech company. So that's how I ended up at considering aerospace, is it bridged that gap, enabled me to continue on some of the knowledge that I'd garnered while I was with Coyote and Access, but then also continuing that trajectory to an earlier arrival at an organization that I wanted to start at, which is another kind of part of it is I think having an idea of the course you want to take and charting that, whether or not you stay exactly to it, having an idea of where you want to end up is really helpful, rather than kind of hopping from job to job. So I knew that I wanted to end up in something in supply chain, hopefully tech focused, and then that kind of helped delineate some of the decisions as they came up. So I think that having some sort of goal for your future career is really helpful. But then as far as the selection of the companies, when you're early in your career, either go like, this is my personal opinion, try to do management consulting because you get exposed to a lot, or get connected with a young company that's developing because you'll experience a lot more than you will at a large organization.
I think that's huge. I've also heard the word or the term chase good leaders. That's kind of the broader thing. But yeah, exposure. I think ambition comes from exposure.
Yeah.
And so you have to see a lot in your 20s to maybe even know like the North Star that you're talking about, which is like, this is where I want to go. This is what I'm about. Takes having a lot of conversations and seeing how a lot of people think and how problems are solved. So I think that's cool that you got to work for multiple different organizations under multiple different leaders, but you also stayed in the same vein. Like it was parlayed from logistics to logistics tech, and tech's so ambiguous now, but I do think there's a ton of value in having that software element. And I was talking to my sister about this yesterday. Once you've broken in and you have direct experience working at a software driven company, or at least software enabled company that has some type of proprietary tech, it really opens a lot of doors for you.
Absolutely.
And we talked about this now for you. Like the first 5 years was just like proving yourself, and you knew any job you were going to have to go out and win. You're going to have to interview well. You're going to have to like have a good resume. Then you hit this tipping point, maybe late 20s, early 30s, where it's all inbound. Maybe for the rest of your career, you're going to get a text job offer at least one a month, maybe for the rest of your life. And so I'm curious for you, how much do you think is that shift that you made to get outside your comfort zone, to get into an early stage company, and to get the resume that has 4 promotions in 4 years or whatever it was?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, how much did that matter?
Well, I think that I'm trying to think about exactly how to answer your question. I think that focusing on progression is a super millennial problem. So it's more people like want the promotion. They're not targeting the knowledge and growth. And I think that I don't even think it was an active choice, but I was just super focused on grinding, and I didn't I think this is what it comes down to. The parting with that startup was not great, and ended up with a period of time where like I didn't have income. So that after access of like having a stable job and then not having income for a period of time just made me super focused on doing good work. And that was the goal. So it was every promotion I had at Airspace wasn't asked for after that. So it was really just like doing the best work I could for what the company had asked me to do. And that being like the primary goal of my efforts. And then good leaders reward good work. So I had the benefit of also working for good people. Actually, the person leading ZEBOX is the person who recruited me to airspace. So there's definitely a chunk of working for good leaders that I was blessed with, because you don't always get to choose who's your boss, especially at a startup, which can have a rotating door of leaders. But I think just being focused on working well for the company, putting the company first, is a long-term game. So short-term chasing promotions can work, but I think there are, in my opinion, fewer and fewer people who are just focused on doing good work. And then when you're with a good leader or a good company, they see that, and the path kind of creates itself.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think one thing that just came to mind, what's that age most people graduate college? Like 22?
Yeah.
So if you think about it this way, between 22 and 30, just try to develop one relationship, like a meaningful relationship with a good leader each quarter. If you do that over 8 years, by the time you're 30, you'll have 32 leaders that should really be in your corner, especially if you've like worked on the relationship with no real agenda or ask over those 8-ish years. Then by the time you're 30, you're going to have people that are really in your corner who they're going to keep growing in their career of that time, and they'll probably open their network to you.
For sure.
And that really changes everything in terms of how you even explore opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's something I've seen you do well. I think that's something we talk a lot about at AlloHire and recruiting, taking the networking approach. So anyways, just a fun thought on that for anyone that's a recent grad.
I think
One leader per quarter.
That's super aspirational. So I think that's a great goal. If you can even do one a year and they're a great leader, you have 8. That's a pretty great, personal group of advisors.
Yeah, and you wouldn't want 30 advisors.
Exactly.
So you maybe want 5.
Yeah, but then you get to pick from them if you have 30, so that's a good thing.
Okay, how about this? On a texting basis
there you go.
with 30 leaders.
That's a lot, yeah.
But you have 5 that you really kind of stay
really
in
strong.
step with and would ask for advice on
Yeah.
big decisions.
Solid.
You talked about something earlier that made me think of this trend we were talking about earlier, quiet quitting. Basically this idea that, and it's been really like catalyzed by the remote revolution too, but not going above and beyond in your job, doing what you're asked, and maybe doing just the bare minimum and to stay on payroll, but not letting work stress you out. I think it really started on TikTok, and some people were kind of using it as a flex to say, I log on at 11 for my tech job, and I send 5 emails, and I log off at 3, and I get paid $150,000, whatever it is. So some of it's kind of like satirical, but I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this trend that like younger millennials and Gen Z are kind of pushing. I think they're saying like if you're born after 1989, that's the highest age demographic of employee disengagement, which would be kind of in line with the quiet quitting idea.
Well, I was born in 1990, so that's hilarious. But I think quiet quitting has been around for a long time. I actually think like a lot of our parents' generation were quiet quitters, and it's no offense to them, but it was just like work was just a thing, right? And I talked about this on a panel at our church right before COVID, this idea of like how to engage millennials, because millennials and Gen Zers and some Gen Xers, it's not a new concept. There's just more desire for connection between our lives and our work. I think that's something that we care a lot more about than previous generations. And so the disparity between that and the quiet quitting culture, which again is like, that used to be check in and check out and punch your card and punch it out, and that's it for previous generations. But I think that it's this like disengagement, right? So I think it's not good. I don't think there's a super simple solve for it, because I think a lot of jobs can end up being like not directly connected to your personal life, which makes you want to give less of your energy to it. So I don't think I even answered your question, but it may be just an opinion thing. But I think that people always say like people quit jobs because of their managers, not because of the job.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's probably a continuation of that, just like through, I love remote work. I work entirely remotely. But you do end up separated from your team in physical proximity. So if there's not very deliberate efforts from organizations to the leaders, to the managers, to the team members to keep them engaged with either their team or the mission of the company, quiet quitting is just going to get more prolific, I think, because we are now removing the like shoulder rubbing with people that maybe you hang out with during the week or on the weekends, where there's that friendship that gets created by physical proximity. So you've lost that. So now quiet quitting is hitting more people that don't have the connection to the company. Does that
No,
make
that
sense?
definitely makes sense. And it's funny, we probably just put new words on it every
Yeah,
30 years.
exactly.
It probably is cyclical, but it is unique that it used to be you still had to be there.
Exactly.
Now you could be in your in your bedroom, I think, watching Netflix and responding to some emails. And so I think my hope is that we can keep finding a balance between, ultimately with salaries, it's kind of the best solution we've come up with.
Right.
But if you can do the work that's asked to
Right.
drive that value in the business in 4 hours, there's no reason for you to work 8 hours. But hopefully you're excellent in your work and you take pride in what your company's doing.
Absolutely.
I know that's the ideal. It's idealistic. We can't always expect that, but that's our criteria when we're recruiting. We want to recruit for companies that we'd want to work at.
Exactly.
Because we believe in what they're doing. So that's my hope, that we can find this balance between, I think you and I grew, like when we came out social media out of college, social media was booming. Like it was really in its first heyday. And I think there's so much content, just like hustle, grind, 100-hour weeks in your 20s, like the Gary Vee in some ways. And it was celebrated. And that's not to hate against that or say that's bad for everyone. For some people, that's amazing. But as a society, every time I've traveled, I know you've traveled a lot. Every time I go to like Europe, I'm like, whoa, feels very different. People are taking 2-hour lunches.
It's healthier.
They might have a glass of wine. Yeah, it just feels like it's not their identity, and they're not rushing to post their promotion on LinkedIn.
No, I was talking with my brothers about this weekend, where it's like the long tangent here on the U.S., but it's like we're the most industrious group of individuals, not just as a country, but like people are industrious. We work really hard. We work really long. We start 1 billion startups a year. We have the most healthy VC process, like all of this emphasis on building, but that comes at a cost of like that balance we were talking about, uppers, like how we wake up and we just crush coffee. Quick shout out. Mad Priest, before you say this. Mad Priest, local coffee shop, and this is a specialty drink. If you go by, ask for the black eye. They might look at you weird, but only the barista knows it, right?
Only the barista.
There we go. Yep. So you have to say it loud enough for them to hear. But it's this concept of just like go, build, but it doesn't leave much room for balance. And I think that to your point about when you and I were first starting our careers, the tools, so like a lot of sales tools, because that's my career, is like didn't exist. Like ZoomInfo didn't exist, so you couldn't just go like find the right people. There's like all of this extra work that had to be done. And now you can work smarter and like actually siphon down the hours it takes. And I think that like that being celebrated, we're a little bit, to your point about Europe, like behind on, just like the ability to do work in time is all that's required, versus this push towards like living, work, get there as early as you can, stay there as late as you can, and like keep on going. I think it burns people out for a reason, because they're not supposed to do it. So I think that,
and arbitrary meetings, stuff like that. I think that's been kind of the traditional like metric of like, are you engaged? It's like, maybe, but if you can switch it to an email, switch it to an email.
And like, if the work is good, that's great. Like, take some time off.
Yeah.
So I think that the remote work combined with smarter systems is creating the ability to have more limited work hours. And I think that's on a like company by company basis. Like you can really easily make it possible to have a 4-day work week, or like shorter hours, or just like when you're done, you're done. And that be a culture. And I've seen a few companies do it, and they're not struggling. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend, shout out to Chad Masters. He always says, don't be limited by your resources, be limited by your resourcefulness. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that you're really good at too. You're always looking at like new products, new systems. I
love
call you my
hacking
product
things.
guy because here's the one thing you need to know about J-Rapp. He's the guy that will take sunflower seeds from the bag and pour them into a separate plastic container because it's easier to get them out of. You're not going to spill any seeds. Like little hacks like that that make a big difference. We're going to have to get kind of rapid fire with some of these last ones. But any products you want to shout out or little hacks that you've found helpful in remote work or just in your job?
Yeah, I would say in my job, have some sort of project management tool that you use for your to-do list. And right beside that, so like I send myself a bunch of Slacks every day. Like if I'm walking and I think about something, a lot of people write it down. I just open Slack and do a voice to text and send it to myself as a reminder. So like get things out of your mind and into something else would be like, it's a simple hack, but trying to remember everything is impossible. And then having that ability to just go grab that concept is incredibly helpful for me. I try to not forget anything, and that's a really simple one. And if you're like, this is a funny one, but like on airplanes, I'll always like open up notes on my phone and do the same thing. Just like start writing down the things that come to mind whenever they come to mind. Don't try to push it off and remember it later.
We call it like mind dumping. Just get it out, and then you can process it more
absolutely
later. Okay, so a project management software tool could even be Slack or
it could
Notes.
be something really simple, but to like keep track of all the things that you're trying to do.
Couple other quick ones. You talked about sprinting to know or blowing up your own deals. For any salespeople out there, what does that mean?
I think it's like people say the second best answer to yes is no, and then salespeople are really like to not lose, so we try to stave off a no for as long as possible. But I firmly believe in rifles, not shotguns, when it comes to hunting. I actually don't hunt. I'm specifically talking about sales, but
that's book number 2.
There we go.
Bluetooth in the bathroom, rifles, not shotguns.
Rifles, not shotguns. But yeah, going after, so we'll just go sales. Going after the people or the companies that you want, then very quickly voicing all of the objections you know they're going to have to them as values of your company. So we talk about like, I grew up in brokerages, and a lot of companies only want to use asset-based carriers. So an example of that would be get on a call, and the first thing, like as soon as you get started on the pitch, you're like, so Access America is a brokerage. This is why we're a brokerage. This is why we're not an asset company. A lot of companies don't want to work with us because they prefer asset-only companies. That's a great thing for them, but this is why we are who we are. So you just got in front of the objection. You give them an ability to stop you right there and say like, well, we're not going to be able to work with you. That's fantastic. Shake hands and move on. But don't try to make that the last thing you tell the customer at the end of the process, because you know it's an objection. Get it out. Let them blow up the deal early, or let yourself blow up the deal early, because deals that are bombs are always going to blow up. It's just when. So the idea is just get to it as soon as possible and then focus on the good ones.
That's good. And is there a rapper that made you think of that?
We were talking about this 8 Mile. So the end of the 8 Mile, the Eminem is going into a rap battle, and he just takes this approach of every single diss that is going to come onto him in his opponent's rap, he projects himself, and then his opponent has nothing to say because every objection or this has already been covered. So that's the same concept. Just get all of it out on the table early, and then you're taking a supportive and like consultative approach, whether it's recruiting or sales or operations. Like all this applies internally and externally of just getting it on the table, giving the person across from you all of the information, and then make a decision together.
That's a confident position too. If you know, it's like self-awareness. You know your strengths and weaknesses, and you're fine to talk about.
Exactly. It's like a subtle, not so subtle flex.
Yeah. I like it. Okay. We're coming up on time. The last thing I wanted to ask you, and maybe we'll have you back sometime.
All right.
But if someone's thinking about Chattanooga,
Yeah.
moving here from California or somewhere else, we've had a lot of people come and work remotely here. I think in our Inc. 5000 list, 3/4 of the 15 companies, what is that, like 12 of the company? No,
Yeah.
math.
That's
11,
right.
12.
11, 12.
Were in logistics and supply chain or around the industry. We had a couple that were not, which I think was just interesting. We are still very much a logistics hub, and that's what Chattanooga was founded as in the 19th century. It was like railroads, and we got the river, so it was lots of logistics.
Yeah.
But what's your pitch for why or why not Chattanooga if you had 1 minute?
I would say why Chattanooga would be, to your point about logistics, if you're building something, whether it's a service or software that addresses the trucking over the road market, this is a fantastic place to come. Your customers will be here. The end users, the secondary and tertiary users will all be within driving distance, and you have a tremendous amount of knowledge to recruit from. Why not Chattanooga would be the inverse. So if you're trying to build something in like crypto, probably not going to be. And I know there's some here that are trying to get started, but there's just not that knowledge base that's been grown over the long term. There are the migratory group that are coming here and working remotely, but it's not the businesses that have built the city. Versus if you come in on the tech side of logistics or anything with logistics, there's just a tremendous amount of support because it's ingrained into the community.
The density of talent,
Absolutely.
expertise. Yeah.
We're
working on it.
I know.
We're
We're
much
gonna
a realist. I'm very much an optimist. We're
That's
going to
right.
keep balancing each other out and try to get Chattanooga's talent market to continue to grow outside of logistics. But huge shout out to all the logistics people that give all these amazing jobs in our city
Absolutely.
and help fuel so much. We want to keep partnering with them and bring in maybe some crypto people.
There we go.
Drew Rogers.
I know Drew
Maybe
Rogers,
some
next
other
guest.
people. Yeah, he might be on our hit list. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, man. That was
thanks
a
for
lot of
having
fun. Going way back, and hopefully we can get you back on at some point in the next year or so. Share some more ideas. I know you got a lot of good ones.
Yeah, I'd love it.
All righty. Until next time.
Thanks.